Let's move over to like the Luigi Mangione case. We haven't talked about Luigi in a while because you know me, I don't like to Fed post. I don't like to implicate people of crimes that I don't believe that they committed. And so I felt like a lot of coverage of Luigi Mangione, a lot of hyper coverage of Luigi Mangione, other than to cover the various ways in which he was being railroaded and having the public's perception of his innocence swayed by various elements of like the state and its aligned media apparatus, like via documentaries or like photo ops with our criminal mayor or criminal president or whoever. Like, you know, I felt the need to cover stuff like that to show how justice is oftentimes colored by the whims of our political establishment. But like, I didn't want to over cover the machinations of his trial. And I will continue to not do that because I think it precludes someone having, the presumption of innocence in some ways. A lot of people were very quick to declare him guilty, very quick to accept every piece of evidence brought out against him. That's not me. That's not your boy. I'm very skeptical. I'm a very rational, very skeptical person. And so we've covered it sparingly. And so this is the first time we've talked about it in a while, in any depth. So Luigi Mangione appeared in court ahead of the murder trial. I think it's from yesterday or maybe the day before with the time difference. So I thought we would just do a bit of a refresher. So if you don't remember, I believe he's facing two sets of charges, right? The federal charges and then like the state charges. The federal charges come with the death penalty. And so he's being forced to, in some ways, like anomalously, to defend himself against both set of cases. And again, an attempt by the government to railroad him, to send a message against anybody who might dare to attack our most protected of classes, millionaire CEOs. But yeah, let's start with this clip from ABC News from 17 hours ago. Luigi Mangione appears in New York City court ahead of murder trial with dozens of supporters. Only dozens? I would have thought it would have been hundreds.
Let's talk Luigi Mangione. He was back in a New York City courtroom today for a critical hearing to determine what evidence will be allowed in his upcoming state murder trial. Mangione's appearance comes nearly a year after prosecutors say he gunned down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in a brazen assassination. The 27-year-old was pleaded not guilty to state charges against him, including murder, as well.
Wow, they draw him so nice. They give him such a crazy. I love the Craypaw, the Craypaw drawing of like the assassination. So I don't know if they're going to mention it. So I guess I'll just mention it ahead of them just in case that they don't. There's been some accusations lobbed by Luigi Mangione's defense attorney, about the acquisition of certain pieces of evidence by the arresting officers, the arresting department, and how it was collected illegally, right? And so there's been the effort to get some of that evidence thrown out. Now, some people might say that that's just something that like any good defense attorney will try to do. Like, hey, you know what? You hire a competent defense attorney, and they're going to try to get as little of the evidence admitted against you as possible. Totally believe that. At the same time, I also believe, because that is just the nature of American policing, and we've seen infinite examples of this. Like, there is a lot of sloppy police work. There's a lot of drunk police work, but there's a lot of sloppy police work. So I would 100% believe that rights were violated in haste to be the department or the officers who like captured the adjuster, right? Captured the CEO killer. And so, we'll just have to wait and see what evidence actually gets thrown out and what, ultimately is made of the chain of evidence and the way in which the arrest was handled. But just like jaw card on like lock here. They drew his jaw extra chiseled.
As well as federal charges that carry the possibility of the death penalty. And joining me now for more on this is ABC News' Rena Roy, who is outside the courthouse. Rena, thanks for joining us. I know you've been there all day. And a lot of the focus today was on surveillance footage from the McDonald's in Pennsylvania where Mangione was actually arrested, and also items allegedly discovered in his backpack. What did it show?
Yeah, well, Rhiannon, you're right. His arrest has really been central to this critical hearing so far. It's really been the main talk in the courtroom today. Prosecutors played out the 911 call from the McDonald's manager who let the 911 dispatcher know that customers were feeling unsettled and upset because they felt that they had spotted the alleged shooter in the Brian Thompson killing. And they also want to show the jury video footage that they say shows Mangione before, during, and after the shooting. You mentioned those backpack items. Those have also been a key piece of evidence in this, including a red notebook that allegedly contained Mangione's writings, and also inside that backpack, an alleged 3D printed gun and a silencer. Prosecutors, of course, want to show the jury that evidence, but the defense is putting up a fight, saying they want to exclude that evidence because a warrant was not used to search that backpack, they say.
And we also heard from a corrections officer about Mangione's time behind bars. What did that corrections officer say?
Yeah, that's right. A Pennsylvania corrections officer is on the stand testifying about Mangione's time in a Pennsylvania high security prison near Altoona where he was arrested. And that officer says he was being held in that high security prison with constant supervision to ensure his well-being. And he said he was told that a supervisor, quote, did not want an Epstein-style situation. And he talked about Mangione approaching him to have a conversation once. He says they talked about their travels, and they also, interestingly, talked about health care, specifically the difference between privatized and
shit. He radicalized the guard. Oh, I love it. He radicalized the guard. Bro, this is like V for Vendetta. The guard's next. This is let's go.
Him to have a conversation once. He says they talked about their travels, and they also, interestingly, talked about health care, specifically the difference between privatized and nationalized health care.
You guys have good health care here? You guys have good health insurance?
Did not give his opinion on that, but he did say that Mangione asked about his perception in the media and also expressed a desire to make a public statement, Rhiannon.
And what was Mangione's demeanor and also the supporters that were in the courtroom as well?
Yeah, so I can tell you that Mangione has been very engaged today. He has not shown emotion, but he seems to be very focused. He is listening closely. He did take notes during that 911 call that was played out in the courtroom. He's also been looking very closely at the videos and the documents that prosecutors have been presenting. Now, as for his supporters, he has seen quite the show of support today. Nearly 24 people showed up bright and early this morning on this cold New York day, hoping to get a spot inside. And they crammed in the back 2 rows of the courtroom, and they at times are craning their necks to try and get a glimpse of Mangione. They're also wearing T-shirts in support of him, Rhiannon.
Right, this is far from over, Rena Roy. Thank you so much for that.
I don't know. I think, it's my opinion, it's over. I think he's innocent. What do you guys think? You know, I think he's innocent. I've seen all the evidence I need to see. %1,000% innocent. They got the wrong guy. You know, look, I don't know about that. All I can say is that I haven't personally seen any evidence, and I haven't gone looking for it. So it's possible that it's everywhere, and I haven't seen it. So, you know, it is what it is. I haven't personally seen any evidence that makes me think that it's 100% him. And I think there are a lot more things that are like weird about his case. Like the way Candace Owens talks about like the series of events that occurred in Charlie Kirk's killing, it to me is more appropriate for something like this, where there is just like a lot more weird things going on, at least from the casual, like for me, the casual observer. Like, you know, why was he there? Didn't he leave the backpack? That's not a photo of him. Like things like that, I think give rise to like conspiracy theories a lot more legitimately. But again, maybe that's just my interest area, where like the Candace Owens is like jumping at Ghost because it's like her friend and like people are down with it. Like he was missing for months. His family hadn't heard from him. He was in Thailand. Like all that stuff like screams MK Ultra. Like, allegedly. I'm not even saying it was him. I don't think it was him. I'm still caught up on those photos. But again, I need glasses. Let's actually, and also I'm glad they mentioned the McDonald's call, because like whatever happened to that guy? Because remember, like the McDonald's call was just one of the like, strange things that people latched on to when they were initially conspiracizing about like whether or not Mangione was like a patsy, whether he was like a fall guy, whether he was like a mind control dude. Like, regardless of where you fell on it, like people were confused about the McDonald's employee because supposedly he called the police to try to get the reward. They called the police. Yeah, right. I don't know. They called the police to try to get the reward for finding the adjuster, and they reported him based on the fact that he was wearing a mask. This is, again, and you have to excuse me for recounting something as I remember it, as opposed to like what is 100% accurate, because this is just what was floating around out there when it was being reported in my recollection, which is that like they called the manager or whatever called to report to the police that there was like some weird guy there that they thought might be the adjuster, because they were wearing like a mask, like a COVID style surgical mask, which is very uncommon in that part of Pennsylvania. And then it turned out that they weren't eligible for like the reward because they didn't call the right hotline, and then we just hadn't heard from that person again. But I guess now they're like actually interrogating the call, like they're playing the 911 call from the manager. So I'm curious about that. Let's listen to that 911 call from McDonald's manager played at Luigi Mangione's pretrial hearing. Maybe they'll like explain what the call said in a little bit more detail, because I was a little bit confused about the call and the McDonald's manager.
Well, the man accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on a New York street is facing a judge right now in a pretrial hearing. Luigi Mangione says he's not guilty to both state and federal charges in that murder.
I agree.
Today, Mangione's attorney is calling into question the use of evidence from Mangione's interaction with the Pennsylvania police officers who caught and cuffed him. Now, this is the scene where that arrest happened, a Pennsylvania McDonald's 230 miles outside of that crime scene. Live now to CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman in New York. So, Katrina, what have you heard in the courtroom so far today?
Reed, it's almost like a mini trial that we're seeing in there. They're calling witnesses for these suppression hearings related to the evidence and statements that Luigi Mangione's defense attorneys do not want to come in if this goes to trial. So far, we've heard from someone from the NYPD, as well as a man who was the installation supervisor of the security cameras at that McDonald's where Luigi Mangione was arrested. We've seen all of the images that were published of the suspect who they believe killed Brian Thompson, that United Healthcare CEO, as well as the video of that shooting. But perhaps the most striking thing that we heard was a 911 call. That came from the manager at the McDonald's, and her conversation with the dispatcher was very interesting to hear, Reed. She called and said that at least 6 customers had walked up to her in the store and said that they were suspicious of a guy who was in there. He was sitting at a table. They said to her, he looks like the CEO shooter from New York. It's also notable that Luigi Mangione,
so weird.
defense attorney,
so weird to say.
did object to this. The judge said that he's allowed.
That, like, I would object to that too. That's such a weirdly specific thing for exactly 6 people to say to you. Like for 6 people to come over to the till and say like, wow, that guy in the corner over there is so weird, right? Like that sounds like 6 CIA agents were planted in that McDonald's to like plant that suggestion in her mind to get her to call and set in motion a seemingly organic set of events, because it's like, come on, man. Like exactly 6 customers came over after finishing their food and looked me dead in my eyes and said, hello, manager of this McDonald's fine establishment. Don't you think that it's weird that that guy over there is just sitting in the corner? To me, he looks just like the CEO killer who killed CEO Brian Thompson of United Healthcare. Maybe you should call the police. Then they walked out. Like, it just that, I don't know. Like, maybe that's just common. Maybe that's just common in Pennsylvania. I guess it is common. You know, people in small towns hate minding their own business.
It in for this hearing, but it will still be in question if they go to trial, if they'll let this play. But the manager on the phone is saying that she told the customers, I don't know what to do here, guys. She describes the person who's sitting at the table. She says he's mid-height, mid-weight. He's wearing a hoodie. He's wearing a blue medical mask, and he's wearing a beanie on his head. So we hear all of this playing
Tim
out.
Pool coded.
The manager ultimately tells her that an officer's on the way and to keep an eye on him. And in this footage we saw too, we see all of these police officers come into that McDonald's. We see the person sitting at the table in the back, sort of how he's...
Yeah, six patrons. Not one of them called themselves, and not one of them has been interviewed by the news. Like, where are these exactly 6 patrons? Don't you think after the arrest that they would be like on TMZ or something? Like, I mean, because maybe they were. Can you show me an interview with this manager or one of these 6 patrons? They seem to love talking. They seem to love to be like sharing their opinions about who looks like the CEO killer. So it just seems strange to me that suddenly they're nowhere.
Cornered in near a restroom. So it's been very interesting to see all of this imagery play out.
Well, you say it's almost like a mini trial there. So you've had proximity to Luigi Mangione. Any reaction from him as he sits there and listens to all of this evidence?
Yeah, that's right. I'm looking right at him during all of this. You know,
Okay,
he walked
I bet.
in today, he's wearing a dark gray suit, a check shirt, but he seems a lot more serious than when I've seen him in the past.
Does he smell nice?
His hair is short, he looks paler, he is watching intently as all of this goes on. His lawyer specifically asked that his hands be unshackled so that he could take notes, and they did allow that, so he's taking a lot of notes, he's talking to his attorneys, he's looking very pensively at these videos and these images as they're playing on the screen, sort of rubbing his hair, touching his face. So
Damn.
very serious today, especially compared to when I've seen him in the past, Reed.
And we're talking about
she's a real
the state
expert.
case. Of course, we know the federal case could bring the death penalty. Are you seeing any of Mangione's family or friends there in the courtroom?
You know, I'm not sure if any of his family or friends are there. There are a number of people from the public, but that too is much smaller than in the past. There's about 3 rows of people from the public, mostly women again. Some of them are wearing shirts with writing on them. One of them, Reed, said, "Justice is not a spectacle." Another one said, "Without a warrant, it's not a search, it's a violation."
That's right.
A
That's
third
right.
one said that there's 11 minutes of missing body camera. So he's still getting a lot of attention. We know that his defense fund has received a lot of money, but there is a smaller showing today than we've seen in the past.
All this playing out while
She had all that truth on one shirt. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's all true. You know, I don't think that they should allow illegally obtained evidence into the court. Evidence. But that's right. You know, we'll of course, I know that we haven't been covering this closely, but we'll definitely cover whether or not the evidence is allowed into his trial once that's adjudicated on.